What up, guys? Sickly here. We're going over my RAFA launcher build. This build is all centered around rocket launchers and heavy ordnance weapons. Now, when I was making this build, I tested a lot of different weapons and different skills. The main thing I've noticed is that this game actually doesn't have a whole lot of launchers in it. I think there's only like 8, I believe, and most of them are pretty unviable. So let's get into the build. All right, so we're going to be selecting a lot of blue and red tree. We're going to be using mantis cannons and specifically the Bullet Buddy Deluxe augment. This augment is the most important part about this build. Without it, you can't do it. So what it does is it gives you infinite ammo for 8 seconds, and that does apply to your ordinances. That's where 99% of our DPS is coming from. Now, our next skill is going to be Deft Hands. This is a very important skill for extra fire rate. Now, the biggest thing with this build is you only have 8 seconds to throw as many rockets you can. So more fight is always very, very nice. Now, our next skill is going to be this one right here. This is a very important skill for extra duration. Basically, every time you get a critical hit, you get 15% more duration. Next one is going to be 2 out of 3 in field repairs. Field repairs is a skill that's very nice. That synergizes with our next skill that we're about to put 3 points in. This one right here. It's a 30% damage dealt depending on how much shield you are. Field repairs gives you, I think, 30% more shields with 2 out of 3 in it. So that's going to be very huge to have an extra 30% damage dealt at all times. Next one is Barrage. This is a huge skill in this one because basically splash damage affects, I think, all ordinances, I believe, and that's going to be huge for damage. Now, it says 30% on the card. It is not. It's closer to 140. The next one we're going to be using is Confetti. Confetti is also a very important skill in this build. Basically, how it works is a flat 40% damage buff on whatever element I'm holding on my gun, which is kind of confusing. But basically, if I'm holding a fire weapon, I'm going to be doing 40% of the damage of the ordnance as fire. So it's an extra 40% damage, which is huge. What up, editing sickly here? I feel like I should explain this just a tad bit better. Basically, it is not taking away any damage from the gun. It is just 40% extra damage for the gun. So it's not changing 40% of the damage to that element. It is taking 40% of your total damage and adding back to it. So it's basically a 40% damage buff. Now, next up is our blue tree, and we're going to be looking at a lot of skills here. We're basically spec'd in 50-50 on red and blue. So the first skill is going to be the Thrill. This is a huge skill because it's so much extra fire rate due to our class mod, which gives us a lot of overdrive bonuses that we'll go over later. We're going to be grabbing this for some extra cooldown rate and uptime on our ordinances just in case we need it. And then these two skills are basically just filler skills to get us further down in the skill tree. You can honestly replace these with any skill tree or any point you want in this skill tree. We just want to move down. I just felt like extra survivability was nice, and metal management is a pretty good skill for 1 point. Then we get to the good stuff. Jackie. This is such a good perk. This one is going to be huge for our splash damage and our fire rates. And then the next, we have Deadline. Deadline is also huge for the extra fire rate bonuses we get. Now, every overdrive skill we do is massively buffed due to our class mod. Now, the class mod we are using is called the Dancer. It is massive because it gives us a capstone, which I didn't really cover earlier. But basically, anytime we get a kill, all of our overdrive bonuses are double. And then the actual ability of the class mod is that all of our overdrive skills are doubled again. So it's doubled twice. Now, off to specializations. We have Now with Caffeine, which is the most important specialization in this build. It basically gives you infinite uptime on our action skill. And I want to give a huge props to Moxie, who's the person who, like, I saw it from first. With the triple bypasses is massive. Gives so much cooldown rate for Rafa. Then we have Gadget Near. These are all very important skills. I would run the first and last one. The first one is very nice for extra uptime on our ordinances. The second one is good, but we're not really expecting the gun damage, so I wouldn't really run it. The third one is very, very good. It allows ours to crit on our ordinances. I have yet to grind for it and get it, but once I do, this build will skyrocket in damage. So keep an eye out for that. Now, next off, we have our gear. We're going to be using the triple bypass because it is very, very strong with the previously mentioned Now with Caffeine. I'd be looking for a fire rate roll or a go-go gadget roll. We obviously, as a dancer, I already covered that. Now, we do want the go-go gadget, or sorry, not the go-go gadget, the Gadget Ahoy firmware perk. It's going to deal so much extra damage for our ordinances. It gives us cooldown and damage. Next, we have the Super Soldier Shield. This is just more fire rate, which is always nice. It also gives you ammo regen, which does work with ordinances. We're going to be using a Torg enhancement. I'm not really sure what the perfect enhancement is, but I think the Torg one is very strong for the Raven Fire. Now, off to the most important part of the build, the ordinances. I've tested every single ordinance in the game so far. A lot of them are pretty bad. Some are pretty good. So the Bottled Lightning, the Raven Fire. The Raven Fire is really good because it has homing missiles, so you can basically stand in one corner and go AFK and nuke the whole screen. Now, the Raven Fire is by far my favorite weapon for mobbing. It's very, very nice. So basically how the Raven Fire works is it's going to be homing projectiles that explode into a star kind of format, I guess. More like a plus line, I guess. And how these extra projectiles or explosions, I guess, work is the further away you're from the missile, the more extra explosions are going to happen. So it's really, really nice to be standing in one corner and just nuking the whole screen. It's a very, very good weapon for drill sites because it takes absolutely no brain power. Now, the Bottled Lightning can also do this just because of how much AoE damage it is. And the bossing's not too bad on the Raven Fire. And what I mean by not too bad, I mean it can absolutely shred bosses. Now, it is a little problematic in drill sites because the projectiles sometimes don't go after the boss. But right here, they do. And you can see how much damage it can do. Now, the Bottled Lightning is a little different because you do have to charge it up, and it takes a little bit more brain power to use just because it is a very slow-moving projectile. But with that being said, it is a very, very AoE-heavy kind of projectile. I mean, you shoot it in one area, everything in that area is gone, and the bossing on it is phenomenal. I honestly think, depending on what you're going against, it might be the best bossing weapon out of the ordinances so far. Now, the next ordinance we have is the Inkling. Now, the Inkling is a little strange because it's not great at anything, but it's not bad at anything either. It's not great at mobbing due to the lack of splash damage, but it does do a lot of single target damage. So you would think maybe it's really good at bossing, but it falls short there compared to like something like the Bottled Lightning, because the Bottled Lightning can hit a projectile multiple times. So it's in this weird middle ground of not being good at anything, but not being bad at anything. It's definitely something that would be fun to pick up and use if you're getting bored of the other ordinances, but I wouldn't recommend it over like the Raven Fire or the Bottled Lightning. Now, the next ordinance we have is the Streamer. The Streamer is really, really bad for mobbing, and it's not great at bossing either, but I can see it not being like utterly unusable. If the boss stands still, it can stack a bunch of those laser beams and do a lot of damage, but it's very situational. And then the next one we have is the Disc Jockey. Now, the Disc Jockey I didn't get footage for some reason, but basically it's pretty strong for mobbing, not better than the Raven Fire in my opinion. It's not that great at bossing either. It falls in line with the Inkling in my opinion as a pretty okay option. Not better than the other two, but definitely a suitable choice. Now, the last weapon I would like to mention for heavy ordnance is the Gamma Void. Gamma Void is utterly useless when it comes to doing any damage whatsoever, but it is very funny to spam and try to crash your game. It looks so silly and sounds even sillier, but unfortunately it does no damage. Basically, the gimmick of this gun is anything trapped in the singularity gets increased, 40% increased radiation damage, which is really not that good for this build, but quite entertaining to shoot. I will say that. Now, you do need weapons. You can't just rely on heavy ordinances, unfortunately. As much as I would like to pull out a rocket launcher when I'm down, I cannot. So here's some pretty strong weapons that I've found for this build. Now, number one, we have the Linebacker. I think this is by far the best option for weapons. It is so slept on and not talked about enough. Basically, the gimmick of this gun is when you shoot, the pellets will keep bouncing over and over again and doing bigger and bigger explosions. Insane damage, especially with us spec'ing to a lot of splash damage. It is massive. The next one is the Wombo Combo. I'm sure you guys know the Wombo Combo. It is also a phenomenal splash damage gun. Those extra rockets do a ton of damage. Now, the last one is going to be the Noisy Cricket, purely because it's quite fun to turn on infinite ammo and then spam the crap out of it. It looks quite silly, and the recoil is absurd, but does pretty good damage as well. And now I will say the Plasma Coil isn't a bad option, but I only really use the Plasma Coil because of the fact you can change elements. It goes really well with confetti, and I think that's about it. If you guys enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate a like and a subscribe. I'm going to try to make YouTube videos at least once a week from now on. I'm very pumped with Borderlands 4. I'm having a blast with it, and I do make daily uploads on my TikTok channel, which is the same name as my YouTube. And I do stream on Twitch every day except for Sunday. So catch me there.